We now return to Illinois Rising, presented by the Illinois Opportunity Project, the radio show discussing honest truth about Illinois policy and politics. Here's AM 560's Dan Proft.
Dan Proft back with Pat Hughes on this edition of Illinois Rising. And Pat, Illinois is responding to the RFP put out by Amazon for HQ2. Now, they haven't offered what the state of Georgia is offering, which is just to name a town, Amazon, Georgia. Although I think Illinois could do Georgia one better and just say Amazon could replace Illinois as the name of the state.
The whole state.
Or Illinois presented by Amazon. We're so in desperate straits for an infusion of economic activity and job opportunities. I think nothing should be off the table. But what they've done instead is what normally Illinois does, is put together the usual suspects, the political clout, some Fortune 500 CEOs that remain, and use them as a lobbying force to lobby on Illinois' behalf. The problem is you can't lobby past the numbers.
Yep.
And folks at Amazon can read these numbers just as anybody else can. All of the numbers that indicate that Illinois is not a friendly place to do business. And you've got survey after survey. The most recent one of interest comes from the economic development firm of Development Counselors International. They publish an annual survey asking hundreds of C-suite executives responsible for scouting locations, the best and worst states for them and why. The worst states to do business, according to the responses compiled by Development Counselors International, worst states to do business are in rank order from worst to less worse: California, New York, Illinois. And interestingly, Illinois, very specific reasons that these executives cited as the reason it's so unfavorable: dysfunctional and corrupt government, unfavorable tax climate, which has gotten more unfavorable over the summer, and then fiscal challenges at the state level.
I think Venezuela is 46th on that list.
We're just behind.
We're just behind Venezuela.
Caracas, we're coming for you.
Yeah.
Fortunately, it was only the 50 states, so we didn't have the embarrassment of third world countries being more favorable for business than Illinois. But for more on this topic, we're pleased to be joined by Robin Domber, who is the Director of Research for Development Counselors International, put together this survey. Robin, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Hi, thanks so much for having me.
So I kind of gave the broad strokes of whose opinions are solicited for this survey, but why don't you provide us some detail on the methodology you all use to compile this data?
Sure. So we have been doing winning strategies in economic development marketing actually since 1996. It's a report that comes out every 3 years, and really our goal with the report is to better understand what and how target audiences are consuming, how they're consuming their information. And for economic development audiences, it's really the corporate executives and the location advisor community that are really their key audiences. So we go out and we conduct a survey every 3 years on, the best way to interact with them, the types of information they're looking for. But ultimately, the questions that seem to get the most interest are those that revolve around these best and worst places for business. And there's a lot of focus placed on that, and rightly so, as this is a very, very influential group of people we're surveying, and no one likes to hear that they're not perceived as favorably as they hoped.
What inures to Illinois' favor? You mentioned there's corrupt politics. Obviously we've got a terrible economic circumstance here, budgets that are out of whack and everything else. But clearly New York State, California, and Illinois are still major destinations and in the running for corporations to come. Is it just the great big cities they have? Is there anything that weighs in our favor, or is it all just bad news?
No. There's definitely assets that put Illinois in a very favorable light. One of them, the most important factor and the biggest factor in a decision-making process for a corporate executive is access to talent. And Illinois has proven itself to have a very well-educated, very hardworking workforce. So that is a key check mark in the plus side of the equation. Another is simply your location. To be located sort of in the central part of the country is also very advantageous in terms of corporations that would like to be sort of in between the East Coast and the West Coast time zones. So that's another check in your favor, as well as just your infrastructure. There's a lot of executives depend on a strong infrastructure, and that's another area where Illinois has excelled in.
It's fascinating to look at the survey, particularly over time, as you said, every 3 years, and see which states rank at the bottom, which states rank at the top, and also kind of the distribution. I mean, California, New York, and Illinois are the overwhelming choices of the respondents. I mean, there's a steep drop-off for fourth worst to fifth worst and then on down. And so that says something about how, I suppose, how government policy is sort of overwhelming everything else positive going on in California, New York, and Illinois in particular.
Yeah, it's very true. And unfortunately, one of the things that we found is that perceptions are extremely hard to change in a short period of time. So, even if there are, success stories that are being promoted, it's still hard to change those perceptions, and it takes a very long time. But yes, it's really, since 2011, it has been those three states that have consistently been in the top three. And so certainly it's, when all things are considered equal, talent, infrastructure, all of those other factors that come into play, it's really going to boil down to where it's easier to do business. And, that's going to be something that really sways a company one way or the other.
Yeah, Robin, and that's why I asked the question about what our assets are and why what are the good things here. Because if you look at California, for example, as a state, I mean, it's obviously got a tremendous amount of assets, the coastline, the weather, the talent, the universities, all the same things that sort of we have in a lakefront capacity here. And then, of course, New York is New York. And despite the assets that these places have, the corrupt political environment and the bad political environment can't overcome what otherwise would be, if these three states were run correctly, they would be giant attractors to business.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. And, I think that really, you were referencing Amazon, and, right in the Amazon RFP, there's a reference to, a cooperative and stable government operating system. And so clearly that's top of mind, and that's not only top of mind among Amazon, but, all corporate decision makers. So again, if it's a choice with all else being equal between a state that has proven itself to be very business friendly and, easy to navigate the regulations and regulatory process, they're going to choose the easier state to work with. So it certainly is, a key driver in terms of decision making. Now,
on the other end of the spectrum, Texas, the most favorable state to do business for the seventh year running. What do executives, site selection executives, and others say about Texas and some of the states that are ranked as the most favorable place to locate a business, to expand a business, in terms of for states like Illinois to maybe say, look, well, what are they doing? Why don't we replicate their success rather than perpetuating our failure?
Sure. So some of it does boil down to sort of the cost of doing business. There's no denying that, a favorable tax climate and, other sort of operating costs do come into play. But what we heard as sort of a general theme is that it's just a very favorable pro-business environment from everyone from, to the very local level all the way up to, the government and the governor and top state executives. So it's really a coordinated effort among all levels of government that are saying, we want your business and here's how we'll make it happen. It's that perception that it's an easy place to do business and that the state will go out of its way to make sure, they're putting their best foot forward and doing everything possible that they can to attract you.
All right. Yeah. I mean, and so even just to kind of the rhetorical positioning and what you hear from elected leaders matters, because it's kind of one of those things, that this is a place that's open for business. We don't look at you as people with the ability to pay, meaning, you're going to be first on the chopping block when we need to stick somebody up for this thing or that thing. And, that matters in terms of where people think a particular state is going, even even sans where it is at the in present tense.
Exactly. And again, it all goes back to just those perceptions and how you're portrayed in the media and sort of those publications that these executives and their advisors are looking at. But it is taking a stand that way. And it's those perceptions that count, and they're sort of hard to sway after they've been sort of cemented and publicized.
She is Robin Domber. She's the Director of Research for Development Counselors International. Robin, thanks so much for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you so much.